Christmas was supposed to feel warm, but in our house it always felt like a performance. Every December, my mother transformed into someone else. She polished the furniture until it shined, rehearsed smiles in the mirror, and practiced stories she would tell relatives, stories where everything sounded perfect. Our family was successful. Our children were accomplished, our lives were admirable. Except me, I was the flaw in her picture. I wasn't loud enough to impress people, wasn't successful enough to brag about, and wasn't settled enough to be respected. While my cousins wore suits and talked about promotions, I wore second-hand clothes and carried unfinished dreams. Dreams that didn't fit neatly into conversation. That year, I was 20. I had just failed another interview and spent most nights working on an idea nobody understood. I still believed stupidly that effort would eventually matter. A week before Christmas, I came home holding a small bag. Inside was a simple gift I bought after skipping meals for days. I imagined handing it to my mother, imagined her smile, imagined just for a moment being included. She was in the living room, scrolling on her phone. I stood there quietly, waiting. She looked up, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, not with concern, but calculation like she was measuring how much damage I'd caused to her image. "What are you wearing?" she asked. "It's all I have," I said softly. She sighed, annoyed, as if my existence required effort. Then she said it, "Don't come for Christmas this year." I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. "What?" She didn't smile. "You embarrass me," she said plainly, in front of my sisters, in front of everyone. The words landed heavier than any slap. "You have nothing to show," she continued. "No job, no success, just excuses. My friends ask about you, and I don't know what to say." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "Skip Christmas," she added, already looking back at her phone. "It'll be easier for everyone." I walked out without another word. That night, I sat on a cold bus bench watching families pass by, parents laughing, kids running, hands full of gifts and hearts full of belonging. I felt invisible, disposable, like a mistake that should have been corrected earlier. I held the small gift in my lap until my fingers went numb. And somewhere between the blinking streetlights and the sound of distant laughter, something inside me hardened not into anger, but into resolve. If I was too embarrassing to be loved, then I would become unforgettable. After that night, I stopped going home. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood my place there. Love in that house came with conditions. You had to earn it, you had to look successful enough to be shown off. I wasn't ready to perform anymore. I moved into a tiny room with cracked walls and a window that barely opened. The heater didn't work properly, and the neighbors were always loud, but it was the first place that felt honest. No pretending, no expectations, just me and my failures. Days blurred into nights. I worked small jobs no one respected, late shifts, early mornings, anything that paid enough to survive. My dreams lived in the hours nobody saw, when exhaustion couldn't silence them anymore. People around me laughed when I talked about building something of my own. "Be realistic," they said. "People like us don't make it." Sometimes their voices sounded exactly like my mother's. There were nights I almost believed them, nights when rejection emails piled up like proof that I didn't belong anywhere. Nights when hunger felt easier than hope, because hope kept breaking my heart. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered Christmas. The empty chair, the word embarrassing, the way she didn't even hesitate. So I turned pain into discipline. I stopped scrolling, stopped explaining, stopped asking for permission. I studied when others slept. I failed quietly, learned faster, and tried again without telling anyone. Each mistake became a lesson. Each setback became fuel. No one clapped, no one encouraged me, and strangely, that made me stronger. I learned how to sit alone without feeling lonely, how to measure progress in effort instead of applause, how to believe in myself when no one else had reason to. Months passed, then years. Slowly, things began to change, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. Small wins stacked on top of each other. A project worked, a door opened, someone believed. I didn't celebrate. I remembered where I came from. I kept my head down and my standards high. I learned that real growth doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It builds while the world isn't paying attention. One night, as I walked home under dim streetlights, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't running from shame anymore. I was walking towards something greater. And for the first time since that Christmas, I felt proud not because I had proven anyone wrong, but because I had survived being forgotten. The silent rise had begun. Success didn't arrive the way movies promised. There were no fireworks, no dramatic announcements, no sudden moment where everything felt complete. Instead, it came quietly. Like a knock I almost ignored because I wasn't used to being wanted. One morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. At first, I thought something was wrong. Missed calls, messages from numbers I didn't recognize, emails marked urgent. I sat on the edge of my bed, confused, heart racing, afraid this was another mistake waiting to happen. Then I opened a link someone sent. There it was, my work, my name, shared by people who had never returned my emails before. An article, then another, then interviews requests. Investors asking questions I had once begged people to hear. Strangers praising something I had built in silence. I reread everything 3 times, convinced it would disappear if I believed in it too quickly. But it didn't. Momentum took over. Meetings replaced late. Night loneliness. My ideas, once dismissed as unrealistic, were now called visionary. The same traits people mocked obsession, stubbornness, refusal to quit, were suddenly admirable. I felt proud and strangely empty. Because success had a way of dragging the past into the light, my mother called. Her name on my screen made my chest tighten in a way success never could. "I saw you online," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't know how to answer that. Tell her what? That I had built everything from the ruins of her rejection? That the nights she slept peacefully were the nights I questioned my worth. She began calling more often, sending messages filled with pride, emojis, and articles she clearly didn't understand but shared anyway. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered my birthday. I was no longer embarrassing. I was impressive. The world kept moving faster. Bigger opportunities followed. Then came the email that made me stop breathing. Forbes cover consideration. I closed my laptop and stared at the wall for a long time. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I remembered a Christmas when I wasn't even worth a seat at the table. When the cover finally dropped, the internet celebrated. I didn't. I sat quietly, holding my phone, thinking about how success changes people's voices, but not their memories. And I wondered if Christmas would feel different this time. Christmas returned like a test I hadn't studied for, but somehow felt ready to take. The invitation came from my mother a few weeks after the Forbes cover dropped. Her message was polite, careful, almost nervous. "We'd love to have you this Christmas. Not come home, not we miss you. Just love wrapped in formality." I didn't reply right away. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned out during the long nights when no one cared. What remained was clarity. I didn't need her approval, but I needed closure. So I went. The house looked exactly the same. Same curtains, same decorations, same smell of cinnamon and pine. But when I walked in, everything else felt different. Conversation stopped. Relatives stared before smiling too widely. Phones slipped into hands. Whispers followed me like shadows. My mother approached slowly, as if I might disappear. She hugged me awkward, brief, and stepped back to look at me properly. Not as a problem, not as a disappointment, but as proof. Dinner felt like a stage play. At one point, she stood up, glass trembling slightly in her hand. "I want to say how proud we are," she announced. "My child has worked so hard and achieved so much." Applause filled the room. It sounded hollow. I stood before I could overthink it. "I won't stay long," I said calmly. "I just wanted to say something." The room fell silent. "I remember the last Christmas," I continued. "I remember being told not to come, being told I was embarrassing." My mother's smile froze. "I didn't build my life to come back and hurt anyone," I said gently. "I built it because that night taught me I had nothing left to lose." I reached into my bag and placed a wrapped frame on the table. Inside was the Forbes cover. On the back was a note. You were right, I didn't belong then. I belong to myself now. I looked at her, not with resentment, but understanding. Thank you, I said, for showing me that love shouldn't be begged for. I walked out into the cold night. The lights outside no longer hurt my eyes. They felt warm. For the first time, Christmas wasn't about being chosen. It was about choosing myself.